Welcome to the Owner to Owner podcast. I'm Michael Kerr, your host, and I'm also the founder of Kerr Capital, where for 22 years now I've worked alongside business owners. Owner to Owner is a business podcast to empower the owners of Australia's small and medium enterprises. Forget the slick stories of tech titans and unicorns. At Owner to Owner we get raw and we get real. Every Owner to Owner episode is a personal conversation with another business owner just like you. We explore the everyday struggles they face and the different pathways they tread to success. Practical advice and plenty of one percenters for better returns, less stress and more enjoyment. You'll find grit, laughs, maybe a few tears and some hard-won lessons only available from others who've been where you are, whatever your stage of ownership. Every owner has a compelling story to share, so join us to listen and to learn. Welcome into the Owner to Owner podcast. Vicki Likoudis joins me today from True North Buyers Advocates. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much, Michael, for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
You think there's a very big opportunity for small business owners currently to either acquire a commercial property or to renegotiate the terms on which they rent their current properties. Is that a good place to start?
Yeah, I think it's we're in a part of the market cycle right now where it's favouring those that want to purchase vacant possession commercial property, so business owners or investors with the knowledge and appetite, but let's stick with business owners purchasing vacant possession commercial property. This is the cycle in the market that favours that. And then also business owners who want to lease commercial property. Okay. So that's the market cycle that we're in.
It's a really highly relevant topic. How did you get your start and what's your? I know you've got a rich family history in small business. Tell us about that.
I do. Whether I liked it or not, but I did like it. So, all right, very quick snapshot. I grew up in Geelong, family background in Geelong, and we grew up in a business background. So my folks had, I think in total, about 5 businesses throughout growing up, and they would all in food, so hospitality background around Geelong and the Surf Coast. You know, folks back then, as my parents did, they would buy a business, they would build it, and they would sell it, and that wasn't necessarily a pathway to wealth back then. It was really the only way in which we could take a break and holiday as a family was in that gap between businesses. So, growing up in a business background, fast forward a little bit, I went to uni and studied English. But my appetite for business was always really strong. So while I was at uni and while I was working in the family business, saved a little bit of money, and maybe someone wiser would have put that towards property back then, but I loved business far too much. So I started my own business at the time, which was in manufacturing cosmetics. So as I'm working in the family business and studying uni, I start manufacturing cosmetics, and I go door-to-door knocking and selling my cosmetics to pharmacies and retailers around the state.
Oh, travelling salesperson.
Pretty much. I was indeed. And there's a psychology behind that, you know, like selling your own product, there's an incredibly emotional element to that, which I found really difficult at the time.
Yeah.
You know, wisdom and years kind of, help you work through that. But that's my background. So I grew up in small business. I've had 3 of my own businesses. I've successfully sold 2. I've been a CEO of a property development company that was pioneering sustainable builds in residential and commercial for a private family office for a few years. Whilst I did have my businesses, one was in Brunswick at the time, about 12 years ago now. I was a volunteer president of an association representing over 650 businesses, which basically means that I was that pain in the backside that would go to council meetings and advocate for the business owners for changes that were happening.
Yeah, that's great to hear that background. I do particularly like the family one and that model of build a business or buy it and rebuild it and then sell it, have a holiday, and then maybe come back and start another one.
Start again.
I know that there's a few businesses I know of that actually own their real estate. They own the property, they own the business, they'd want to break, so they'd become the landlord, and then somebody else would come in and sell the business and with the leasing.
Yes.
But that model of own, because it's so all encompassing in a business, in a family business, so you need a break, right? And if you can't, it's too good to close it for 6 weeks, so you just work really hard for an extra year or two and then go on holiday. But,
totally.
Yeah.
Particularly back then when it was food related, and food is really so sensitive based on who it is that's cooking that food, right? So it wasn't a matter of passing it on to for someone else to run the business for a few months. You had to shut it down. You had to sell it.
Yeah, it's a model that I think has still got some merit. Some people are wired, high energy and put everything, and then the reward is go do something for 6 months, come back, and you can build a business quickly if you've got the right skill sets.
That's right.
So back to the property, the commercial property thing. I wanted to say your current business is you're a buyer's advocate. That's true north. So in relation to what does a buyer's advocate do, and how might that help a small business owner who's leasing or looking to buy a property?
Yeah. So we're commercial property advocates for clients that are looking at either purchasing or leasing property. And that could be business owners, business leaders, organisations. We work with a lot of non-profits. And as a buyer's advocate, really, our role is to unearth all the information relevant to a property purchase, and whether that's sourcing a property or whether that's helping them secure a property that they've chosen or that they're currently leasing and want to buy. So it's quite varied in my line of work based on what their end goal is. And so for us, a full source and secure, when a client comes to us with a particular brief, they want to buy a property, and sometimes they think it looks a particular way or in a particular area, and we from the get-go help them really work through that. Is that the best proposition for you? Have you considered these alternatives? So a very consultative approach to start with. But yes, in a nutshell, we help clients purchase commercial property, lease commercial property, secure commercial property.
Okay, so by alternatives there, do you mean sometimes buying may not necessarily be the right thing for them? It might not be the right property, or they haven't thought enough about where they might be in 5 years' time. Are those the sort of advisory things that you discuss with the...
Yeah.
You put a big chunk of time and a lot of money into a property, it's got to be fit for purpose for a length of time that makes it worthwhile.
Commercial property is, a lot of people say that there's no emotion in commercial property. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. There's a lot of emotion when it comes to business owners and leaders and organisations, and what they need to do is to set them up for success. So I'll give you an example. There was a client that approached us. They wanted to set up a dental practice, and they had their heart set on a particular site within a particular strip, not for any other reason other than they thought that was the best proposition. So we were connected to them through the lawyer to help them negotiate on the lease for this particular site. I looked at the site and I knew instantly that particular proposition was going to make them go backwards before they went forwards, at least a couple of years. Yeah. The base building was not in a condition that it was ready for a medical fit out. So in that particular instance, we sat down and from a consultative point of view, I let them know that I'm happy to get engaged, but getting engaged in negotiating for this site might not necessarily yield the result that they wanted. So I let them know that in terms of what they wanted to negotiate. They wanted the landlord to contribute a significant amount to the repair of the building. Yeah. And many instances, a landlord doesn't have that appetite. They don't need to do what they don't want to do. We can help negotiate or position the negotiations. So to answer your question, it might be that they've got their heart set on a particular site. We need to drill down why that particular site. There might be better options for what they want. And we help them review all the available options because they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, and you can bring your experience of the property market particularly, but also as an owner. And, at the end, I'd love to, chat about a couple of, client stories or things. But, I do also want to loop back before I miss it, is why you talked about this is the time in the cycle. Why is that the case? Why are we in a stage where it's good for tenants or businesses or prospective buyers?
There's a couple of things that have happened. So when interest rates increase, like the increase in rates that we experienced, When they start climbing, commercial property is generally the first to take the hit. And then when interest rates start coming down, commercial property is generally the last to recover. So we're in that part of the cycle right now where a lot of investors have stayed away from commercial property investing. So when you're looking at acquiring properties that are on the market or off market, you're not necessarily dealing with the pool of investors that otherwise would have been there. That will start changing now that interest rates are decreasing. But we're still in that part of the cycle where it's a buyers and a tenants market because the investors are not necessarily there from a buying perspective. What has also happened in Victoria is because we had the changes to land tax mid last year, a lot of the old school property owners that held onto their property for a very long time are now seeing that increase as no longer being viable. So where commercial property, generally you have a lot less stock than residential property anyway, and much fewer transactions, what we've now experienced is a loosening up of stock because they're selling as a result of land tax.
Right.
And the third thing, apologies, and the third thing I would add to that is there are a lot of property owners in commercial that have had their properties for decades, and rather than passing the property down to their kids and potentially that causing disruption within the family, they're selling it off and passing down the proceeds.
Okay. Yeah. So that land tax thing, you go around to regional towns in Victoria. I've spent a lot of time working with business owners, and they're littered. Some towns are littered with vacant commercial property. Yep. And maybe it is hitting home now that you could sit on it for a while, not have a tenant, but when you're getting whatever the tax rate is, it's clearly it's having its effect.
Yeah. And with that, can I just add to that, when you're looking at vacant commercial property and you're investigating a particular area to move your business into, really look beyond the vacancies, because more often than not, or in many instances, what's happened, particularly in economic diverse areas or economically buoyant areas, you've got old school landlords that have held onto these properties and not changed a single nail in the place. And why is a business owner going to go and contribute all the fit out when a landlord's not coming to the party with anything? So therefore it stays vacant. But that's shifting.
Is it true also that there are holders of multiple commercial properties? I bump up against this where there's a strip and there might be a couple of key landlords that own a big portion of it. So your negotiating power was challenged as a prospective lessee, or because it turns out there's only a couple of people that own a lot of the property.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a fair? Yeah.
Absolutely. They bought them back in the day when commercial property was cheap. And I had a business on Sydney Road, Brunswick, just off Sydney Road, Brunswick. And the majority of that strip, you can count, there's a handful of property owners.
Like this it's quite remarkable. I've had business sales swing on, it makes a whole lot of sense if it's a retail kind of business. The length of the new lease, the attractiveness of the terms go, a big way to determining the value of the business, but also the sellability. Absolutely. And then if you bump up against a landlord that doesn't want to play ball, it completely can disrupt the sale for the owner who's put in all that time. And
has an incredible impact.
Yeah, and I think it's as much as we see all these talk about business failures or whatever, there's got to be securing or finding a pathway to a secure tenancy for your business is something that hoping a lot of owners are starting to aspire more to. It does, because as you say, the cycle is good, and maybe it's a generational opportunity to pick up something. Also, if it's a kind of business where these great destination businesses, people will go there or there because of the business in that building.
Absolutely.
And you can really put your mark on it.
Negotiate everything. Now's the time.
It is the time. I love driving in and seeing when someone had a building and their name was bricked into the building, and in the 90s or not, that when that building was built, the business was, and the business and the building were attached.
Yes.
I'm getting all emotional about these great old businesses, but we're going to get back to the, now's the time to to make a move?
It requires a bit of agility, and I think that I really value this conversation that we're having, and hopefully it lands with people to understand that there are options. Don't put commercial property in a too hard basket. Ask the questions. There are options, leasing or purchasing.
Yeah. And is there a bigger market for commercial properties? I mean, there's with businesses, there's what's for sale that's listed, but I think there's multiple more businesses potentially for sale that aren't advertised for sale. Is it the same logic? Here, just because a building's not for sale, should that not put you off from finding out if you think it's a particularly interesting building?
The reason why I love working with business owners is because it requires it's savvy and it requires a real lateral approach sometimes to securing an opportunity. And so to answer your question, yes, off-markets are great. Sometimes off-markets are off-market for a reason, and that needs to be interrogated. But probably half of what we're securing for clients, mainly for purchasing, are off-market opportunities or pre-market. As we know in commercial property, leases are long. So when we get a brief from a client, I want to know what's going to be coming up as an opportunity potentially 6-12 months later. Start having those conversations now. We pursue property owners directly, developers, agents. There are many different ways to explore an opportunity. Don't just look at what's on real commercial and commercial real estate.
Yeah. Look first at where you think your business would be better to be situated in, and then work backwards from there.
Exactly. Yep. And explore every single opportunity. Talk to other business owners in the area that you're pursuing. I talk to insolvency practitioners. I talk to accountants. I talk to any which way that I can get a conversation going as an opportunity for a client.
How does a small business owner, you talked about being consultative. What does that look like? So an owner says, I'm operating currently in a place where I'd like to secure my tenancy, so I want to buy the building. That's an example of...
That's one example. It's a good one, yeah. So I've had 2 of those conversations today alone. Yes, that happens a lot. So we get focusing on business owners or operators rather than investors, because that's a different approach. So business owners will come to us and they're either leasing and they want to purchase and they're open to the area. And they're open to, they've got an idea about the area. They're open to what that might look like in terms of where to purchase, or they have a particular property in mind. So when they have a particular property in mind, I'll use today's as an example, the latest one that we had a conversation around. Osteopath, and been leasing for 2.5 years, coming up to in 6 months' time to renew their option to lease, and they want to purchase it. So they've approached the agents by way of having a conversation, and they're not getting very far, which is not surprising, because agents that are helping you or representing an owner and leasing the property, they really want to have a discussion around selling, because it's in their best interest to keep it on the books, right? So in this particular instance, and what we do with clients is we say, okay, we help them evaluate and understand whether this is the best proposition for them in terms of that particular site. And if they do want to proceed with that particular site, then in some cases where we see it being the best play, and more often than not it is, we'll go in and represent an anonymous buyer. And we've got different ways to do that based on the strategy that we evaluate is going to be the best approach.
I love that. That's good. It actually shouldn't matter to the owner of the building. Like, we either talk turkey about, it's the right time for you to potentially sell. Yeah, who is... that's on a needs-to-know basis.
Absolutely
for
it is. Yeah. I mean, it's commercial. At the end of the day, if they want to sell it, let's have a commercial conversation about market value and selling it.
Yeah.
So we will go in either representing our client directly. It depends on how far down the track they've had the conversations, and we always advise clients, like, if you're curious about purchasing the property in which your business is located in, get in touch with us first. And there's no obligation conversations to start with. I really want to help position them.
Yeah.
Because the approach might be best to come with us, or you might be far down the track. And if I can give you a couple of pointers, fantastic.
Yeah.
So yes, if they're operating in the site and they want to purchase it, depending on the strategy, we help them work out the best approach. Now, in some instances, we approach the property owner and they simply don't want to sell. In which case, I really want to support business owners and say, okay, there's an engagement fee for us to carry out this initial bit of work. If it hasn't worked out because simply they don't have the appetite to sell, then I will credit that amount and go for a full search and secure. It may not be the best business model, but I'm in this business for a reason and it fulfills what I want.
Hi there, just a short interruption and a message from Kerr Capital. Kerr Capital specialise in advising business owners who want to get sale ready or, as is increasingly common, get approached out of the blue by a potential buyer. If this is you, I know there'll be plenty of big questions and a lot of uncertainty. We're expert at supporting owners in making significant personal and business decisions and then helping create a really strong plan of action. If you want to find out more, contact us at the Kerr Capital website and then we can book a 45-minute no-obligation discovery call. Now let's head back to the podcast. Come back to why and how a business owner can, from your perspective, securing your tenancy by buying a building is pound for pound a better option than leasing even on a long-term arrangement, because it flows straight to the value of the business and the flexibility at the end of your time when you don't want to run the business.
Yeah. I mean, potentially, it's not for everyone. Buying a property for your business is not for everyone, and you've got to weigh up. And I think that the conversation needs to start first with your accountant. A lot of people come to me because they're curious about commercial property for their business, and they simply aren't ready to take the next steps. I really set them back a couple of steps to have that conversation first with their accountant to understand, is this the best position for you? Because we're not financial advisors. And then can they afford to buy the commercial property? From a cash flow perspective, yeah.
And does it inhibit what they do with the business? Because, yeah.
Exactly. So if they've got funding and they've got a limited amount of funding, maybe that's best spent in the business to help grow the business, to help grow the revenue or the bottom line so that you can then purchase your property. I've got a young girl right now that I've just helped her source and secure a site to lease, and we negotiated on that one beautifully, I have to say. So very, very good position for her. But I love the fact that she's just signed now the lease, and her first conversation post signing the lease was, how do I now set myself up to be able to buy this site in 2 years' time? So
right. And
fantastic.
Is that where you might put an option into the lease agreement to possibly?
That one there, it's a good question. So that one there, yes, in this instance, only because of the fact that this won't apply to all instances, only because of the fact that the landlord is exceptional and a good person and wants to support this particular operator and sees this as being an opportunity for him as well as for her. We don't necessarily want to put it in as an option if we feel it would disadvantage negotiations.
Okay, yeah, yep, all right. You raised a really interesting thing there, this cooperation, for want of a better term, versus competition between a landlord and a tenant.
Yeah.
And this ground where there is a good landlord, in inverted commas, and they're interested in seeing somebody start a business, start the right business in that location. In your experience with all the landlords, do you see some that are open to more, even like getting to a point where it's like a rent share or an incentive-based structure rather than just $3,000 a week, plus outgoings and that's it? Are there some of those? Is that another way of being flexible as a landlord to get a reasonable return, but also see that building and the business owner deliver something really special?
So there's two ways to answer that. We're in the cycle in the market where they don't have a choice, but they have to negotiate because there's a lot of properties out there for lease. And the commercial ones are going to be open to what that negotiation looks like. So obviously as a landlord, they want to maintain the value of their property, which means that they don't necessarily want to see a decrease in the rental. And for any incentives, they want to see a long-term commitment in the terms of the lease. What we can do, as an example, is for a client that we helped with a lease recently, we negotiated, because we're in a position to, and the reason why we're in a position to negotiate so well is because we had options, and I openly disclose those options where relevant. So in this particular instance, we negotiated.
As in, I could go across the road, or I could do.
Yeah, we give the relevant information, not too much. just enough. And in this particular instance, we secured 4 months rent-free, 3 additional months at 50%. We negotiated $30,000 contribution from the landlord, and also in addition to the contribution, the landlord's also doing some creative work for us to get some extra parking. That works for us clearly. Very, very good opportunity for us. And from the landlord's perspective, yes, they're going to take a hit initially, but then they've got a, we've got a 4x4x4. So we've got a long-term tenancy in place. And the reason why we're able to leverage that is because my client will be spending a significant amount on the fit out, So you've got to look at it from both ends. It's a business conversation, and you want to make sure that everyone wins as a result, but I'm representing my clients. I want to make sure that we get the most advantageous position.
Yeah. I mean, at a theoretical level, at least, you're going to require a commercial tenant, which is a business. Typical, It could be a not-for-profit. I mean, you said you work in there, but, to maintain the value of the building or the peak valuation, it's going to, it's all about the rental stream, isn't it?
That's exactly it.
Capitalised at a whatever rate. And so, I sort of start to understand that lag in the cycle, because business owners will hang on for as long as they can, but then eventually something gives and they perhaps leave, exit, and that's why there's perhaps that lag.
And to that, can I just add to that, only because we mentioned it before in terms of this particular client wanting to purchase the site in a couple of years' time. And if you are in a position to negotiate prior an understanding of a fixed price that you are both willing to discuss when it's time to sell, because what's happening is once you go in as a tenant, especially as a long-term tenant, and you contribute or you spend a significant amount on the fit out, all of a sudden you've increased the property owner's value on that property. So you don't want to set yourself back when it comes to purchasing that property, because
you pay twice.
You pay twice, exactly.
Yeah. So, and it's you put it as, I don't know what the accounting is. I learned it one time, like leasehold additions or something. But if the landlord can play really hardball and say, I want the property returned to its absolute original condition. So
the make good clauses.
That's a killer for.
Well, yes, and
it could be.
It could be, absolutely could be. And that's why it's the time in the market right now where it is a tenant's strongest position to be able to negotiate.
Do you do much work in regional areas? And is it across the country or is it mainly Victoria?
So our HQ is in Melbourne, in Carlton, but our work is nationwide, and probably currently about 40% of what we're securing is in other states and the remainder in Victoria, and that's widespread. Melbourne, Geelong, regional, coastal, whatever the requirements are. So investors are taking us nationwide, depending on what their brief is and what their end goals are.
Yeah.
However, property owners our businesses are as well. I work with a couple of non-profit groups that have nationwide requirements. And so we either lease for them. Next week I'm in Sydney leasing for them, or we purchase for them, and we just did one for them in Brisbane and help them with the fit out.
Okay. Do you see any real difference between metro and regional in terms of that opportunity, or is it sort of across the board?
It's across the board.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially in Victoria.
So that the land tax is having a significant effect.
Unfortunately, because property owners are going to take a hit. But now that this is the standard for business in terms of property ownership, and you're incorporating those, unfortunately, you're incorporating those costs into the final result for a tenant. So when you're leasing a site, particularly a warehouse, you'll be paying for that.
Yeah, it just trickles down.
Exactly. Yeah, okay. You may not be able to incorporate it if you're a landlord into a retail tenancy, but, many will start look at increasing the rent to be able to mitigate and what have you.
Yeah. Have you seen, you and I chatted when we had a call about a week ago about this model in Castlemaine, which is community ownership of a key property.
Yeah.
I was really, it was a really wonderful thing to watch our local community rally. Significant old building, landlords wanted to see it stay in as working as a hub for all these other small businesses. They wanted to see it stay like that, basically rather than seeing it redeveloped. So the community rallied, and the a co-op was formed, or was an existing co-op, and they raised the money to secure the property. And I think it's just about done. But that was a really great story to watch, and because all going well, it secures the tenancies for around, I think there's around 12 or 14 small businesses in that hub. And that at a macro level, it enables the owners of the building, which is this co-op, to stay on course as a provider of office services for these businesses. If it gets developed, there's they've got to go somewhere else, or it's quite disruptive. So is that also something you see when, particularly regional communities, they want to secure key businesses like a pub, so they buy the building or they buy the business, and is that something you're seeing a bit of?
Unfortunately not. I think that coming off the back of COVID, a lot of people are still in survival mode, and I love these conversations so much. I think that property ownership should not be a one-size-fits-all. The democratization of property ownership is something that I'm really, really interested in and always have been. There are models in Europe that do this quite well, like these lateral approaches to community ownership, and I think that I'm really excited by the proposition of exploring that a lot more. So I don't see it enough. To answer your question, I don't. And I love what's been happening in Castlemaine. Yeah, I think that, learn from the challenges, celebrate the wins, and replicate where you can. I think it's a beautiful process. Yeah.
I was privy to another one in South Australia. I did an episode of this podcast maybe 2 years back, and it was a beautiful coastal location, restaurant, bar, meeting place. It was the suburb had sort of developed around this thing, and the locals, the people running the business owned the building right on the water, and they made it. They said to the community, "We are tired. We want to retire. We understand our place. We understand this place is vital in this community. So we'll as I understand the Castlemaine story, a bit like that. And I'm sure there are others as well. We'd like to give you guys, the community, an opportunity to do this." But so there was this rallying, formed a mutual or a cooperative, and everyone was energised, and the owners did indeed sell the building to the cooperative, and everyone got super excited, and they were running this thing, and they were throwing in. It was a bar, it was a meeting place, and they were doing vinyl nights, and they were doing. But after 12 months, I think they had security over the property. It's challenging to run a business that was that diversified. And I drove over there, coming back from Adelaide, and I went for a drive, and 12 months later, the building's it's emptied and because great to have the property, but then there's a business to be run as well to keep paying the interest. Yeah, so I think that's the right model. It's just perhaps getting excited about the property, but you've also got to match that with a fundamental understanding. This is hospitality businesses, which it was, aren't straightforward, and people get burnt out volunteering or being one of the members. So it was the model's right.
It's hard enough to run a business, let alone with layers like that. And it's idealistic, and I think that it's beautiful. And I'm again excited by the prospect of this happening more and more. And I don't think that people should be demotivated by exploring things like this just because it's difficult. I mean, this is where real growth happens, right? And real change happens. I think it's ripe for disruption right now. There's some models that simply aren't working for us anymore as we enter whatever this new world holds for us. So these conversations, particularly getting involved with community, your local community, and it doesn't even matter if you're in Metro Melbourne or Sydney, your local association, really getting active and participating in that is important. I think it's important because it connects you to something bigger. So it's important anyway from an individual point of view. And then, look at the progress that you can make or the influence or the impact.
Yeah. Look at where I am. You can see it. I've only been up here for 12 months, but there are quite a few towns, and you just feel like there are one or two interesting businesses away from being a fully formed, really great, cool location. You can you get a vibe, or there's fair few for lease, but then something pops up, and then something else pops up, and it can be the same in Sydney Road, Brunswick or Coburg, or they're all kind of, in some way they're all local. So it's getting the locals engaged by putting something good in those businesses. But I'm fascinated that the opportunity to firstly secure a building by buying it, and then the impact it can have in a smaller 2,000 person strong town. Like you put 2 or 3 businesses, and they're not going to survive on locals. They're going to need the locals, but it's going to be about getting the right businesses to get more people into town to go to that destination thing. And not everybody in town will want that, but I think a lot of people would probably want it.
I mean, the reason I love commercial property and why I've always been drawn to it is, so firstly, I was very heavily involved with it on the family side going back. My folks, Greek background, they didn't really speak or read English, so I'm the oldest of the family. I was involved in reading the leases. As a 7 and 8 year old, I was advising accordingly. So from that perspective, the reason why, so commercial property is familiar to me and is laid and is complex and it's where my skill is. But more than that, it's where my joy is, because beyond commercial property, I really love seeing how it influences and how it impacts the local community as well. A business in a commercial property, and then the real influence and impact that it can have in the community is a real joy.
There's no, it certainly is, and to be the owner of a business, it's that such an important part of the town is also, I'm sure it has its moments, but it's
like everything.
Like everything. All right. I did hint at, have you seen anything particularly, you don't have to talk about names because it's all confidential, but so businesses that popped up and you go, wow, this has impacted or significantly changed that local landscape. I mean, you talked about not-for-profits getting a foothold, but nothing comes to mind. It's kind of put you on the spot there.
No, that's okay. There's one that I'm working with, and it's incredibly confidential, so I want to tread carefully around the information, but I do want to share that there's an opportunity in working with a non-profit group that represents a particular demographic, and helping them leverage their conversations with the property owners to be able to potentially purchase this land will have such a significant impact, not only in the short term for this community, for this geographic community, but the legacy, the long-term legacy that it will hold is so inspiring, And look, I'm commercial. I have businesses, understand the viability required to run a business successfully, to sell that business. But, it's also really, really important work to be a part of a project like this, where we understand the short-term benefits, but we keep our eye on the long-term.
Yeah.
The long-term goal for all, so, and property is a part of that. Property is what does that for commercial property.
Yeah. Look, I think about...
I was vague, sorry. But
you had to be. But no, you had to be. And it wasn't vague, it was descriptive enough. It's a service offering in a place that's vitally important, now and into the future of that that place, that geography. This is one of my deep fascinations is what is the minimum viable commercial infrastructure in it for a town to survive? And you need diesel or fuel. Yeah. You need a pub. People are going to argue the toss, but you need milk and bread, and there's probably 20 things, 20 in a bakery, and so there's 20 buildings that you're going to have, and if you lose one, it makes it harder for the other 19 to survive, because that one purchase then for the locals will have to go somewhere else to get it, so they might start buying things that they would have bought at number 4 and number 9 and number 13, and that's so these all of these these regional towns, there's enough buildings, some of them in pretty bad order possibly, but there's a pathway there to a viable, sustainable local economy.
Well, in that particular instance, we're up against a developer So the developer is going to potentially cut it up and produce some housing out of it, and that's great. That's a short term. The developer taking a hold of this is a good short term sugar fix for the local community. But if the homes are not of a particular quality, as I suspect they won't be, the long-term proposition and what that can ultimately do to the community, it needs to be considered.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got to weigh it all up. We've got to weigh up the sugar fix versus long-term.
Yeah, we're going to have housing for staff in businesses that are growing, affordable, and but we also, it can't just be Airbnb, up to the eyeballs. All right. Vicky, my closing question for you is if you were installed as the head of the Federal Small Business Department today, and you were at your desk tomorrow, top three.
Top three.
What are you saying to the rest of the caucus to get shit happening? Yeah.
I mean, it's so hard running a business, right? It just feels like at times just speaking with a lot of business owners, and I am a business owner, and everyone and most of the people that I know are as well, small, medium, large. It constantly feels like you're battling uphill, right? So I wonder what that support looks like in terms of funding for businesses. So first and foremost, I'd be looking at what the funding and what that cash support looks like for businesses. It feels like at every turn, kind of like it's a little bit more of a chokehold in terms of like, you take 2 steps forward in business and it's 3 steps back. So I think that there's real support needed from a funding perspective. Going in a little bit deeper than that, we're entering this new world of AI and whatever that looks like. So one of the key things that I would also look at putting in place when it comes to support is skill support. So what does it look like for us to be able to skill our business owners, active business owners, the relevant business owners, those that want to be skilled, to skill them up into this new world that we're entering, because we're exiting this industrial era that we've come from and entering the digital era and the AI era. And I think that if we can position ourselves as a country to be able to skill our business leaders, our business owners to enter this new world, even from a micro perspective, to skill them 1% or 5% more than where they're currently at. Can you imagine collectively what that might mean for the country? So that would be something there. Yeah. And I'd also, I think that it's also important to recognise some of the hardship associated with business ownership is the isolation and, again, that lack of support felt. I think that what would be interesting as a country would be, how do you incentivise business owners to consider and care for themselves in a physical and a mental health capacity? It's lonely sometimes being a business owner, regardless of how big or small your business is, or a business leader. And as a government, really recognising that and supporting the backbone of our Australian economy with SMEs and providing them an incentivised structure to be able to look, I don't know, what is it, like 5 sessions of mental health care, physical health care, whatever that looks like. As a government, we are spending so much in infrastructure for hospitals and healthcare, which feels like it's spending a lot in treatment. How about we spend it in preventative care?
Yeah. No, good ones. Good ones, yeah.
Thanks.
The thing about lonely, it comes up all the time, and it's true. And so I always say, you get out, join some networking groups, keep up with your mates, talk to someone who's a professional if you need it.
Yeah.
Because it is lonely and it is a challenge, and it's hard to take that back home in a lot of situations and have anybody else to kind of deeply understand what it's really like. So you're completely on the money. And the thing about in a few days' time, I'm interviewing someone, ASX listed company, supercharging SMEs with AI. The thing I'm so excited about this is because if you get they're a big group and they are the backbone, but it's a bit of a time in the cycle for them as well, because you can embrace AI, or you can, if you're a worker in a big corporate, there are jobs are going to roll. At least if you're an owner, you for the time being, I think you've got a choice, and you can totally embrace it and actually scale your business, grow your business, make it easier to run, make it more robust through the small business advocacy and lobby groups and all these other things. If you focused it and said AI is a big opportunity for small business owners, and face some dire consequences if you don't
Yeah.
a bit of a time in the cycle for that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that business owners need to be incentivized, because if we keep speaking about the dangers of not embracing this kind of technology, they're simply going to avoid it, right? And they're simply going to resist it. And I think the incentivization of it is interesting. I don't know what it looks like, but I think that as a country, if we can encourage this micro move towards it, as a collective, we all benefit.
Yeah. It's a whole, we've got 2.6 or 8 million. 60% of those are basically zero employee businesses. So that's a lot of individuals who are working from home, probably, but, who can, with the right incentive and awareness and whatever, can seize the opportunity. All right. Vicki, thanks so much for your time, expertise, interest. I just really was so keen when you reached out to have this conversation. The time in the cycle is right, and we've heard it from you who are living and breathing there every day. So thanks for sharing that. Thank you for the opportunity, Michael. I think, in a closing statement, just explore possibilities. Don't be closed off to the opportunities out there. Ask the questions. And it's a really good time. And I probably see it for the next 6 to 9 months. All right. It's not going to last forever. So get on it. Get on it. All right. So for someone to reach out to you, you're happy. What's the best thing for them to do, Vicki? I think that any which way, email's probably best. I'm happy to share my mobile with you, but email through. We'll jump on a 15-minute call. If I can help, I will, and if I can't, I will certainly point you in the right direction. Okay. Well, we'll look at. What's the URL for your business at least? What's the what? Sorry. Your website for your truenorthba.com.au. Truenorthba for buyers advocate.com.au. Yeah. Okay, Vicki. Well, I'll be in touch and we'll put some of that in the show notes. Thank you again. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. You too. Take care. Thank you. You too. Bye, Michael. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Owner to Owner and got some helpful advice and maybe some more clarity on how to make your business work better for you. To subscribe or to listen back or to access any of the resources or information we talked about in this episode, head over to the website owner2ownerpodcast.com.au, or you can search up Owner to Owner Podcast on your favourite pod player. If this episode or the podcast generally is really helpful, I'd love it if you could leave me a like, a rating or a review, but even more than that, I'd love it if you could share it with another business owner. There's a new episode out every couple of weeks. I'll catch you then.